This is Launching Your Daughter podcast, and I'm your host, Nicole Burgess, licensed marriage and family therapist. The information shared in this podcast is not a substitute for seeking help from a licensed mental health professional. Now, here is today's episode. Episode 7. Welcome. My guest today is Charlotte Heiler-Easley, who is a licensed clinical social worker of Charlotte Heiler-Easley, LLC. She is trained in EMDR, certified in equine-assisted psychotherapies through PATH International, and EGALA. She is located in Lexington, Kentucky. Charlotte offers a variety of workshops for women, and one of them she mentions in our conversation is called Gracefully Letting Go. This workshop is for moms who have children who are graduating and preparing to leave the nest. She talks about how moms are asked, how do I do this with grace and manage all the emotions? Working with horses is another experiential approach. I have done this work myself in the past, and I worked with an equine specialist. I found this approach to be helpful and create positive changes for the families I worked with. I hope you enjoy the episode as much as I did with Charlotte. Her work with mothers and using horses can create connection and gain confidence. Here is today's episode. Welcome, everybody. My guest is Charlotte Easley, and she is going to talk a little bit about her work with equine-assisted psychotherapy and her work with women and teens. And I am so excited to have her on today and to share this information with all of you because this is one of my past life experiences of working with horses, and I think it's just absolutely amazing work. So welcome, Charlotte.
Thank you, Nicole. I'm so glad to be here today.
Good. Can you tell just our audience a little more about what type of work you do and why you use horses?
Okay, so I came to this work out of a season after we launched our children, actually. And horses and therapy dogs have been part of my history, and I've always had a heart for women. So when I went back to school to get my MSW, we have an equine program at that school. And of course, I live in Lexington, which is horse capital of the world. And yes. So horses are a part of everything. And I know that there is great power in horse-human relationships and animal-human relationships. And I had the opportunity to combine those two as I got my degree and did my internships. And what I had no idea of how it was going to be so powerful a model for doing the work that we do. And I came from working at a rape crisis center with women who had complex trauma, women and men actually, who had very complex trauma. And what we saw was often the horse was the first place where they could feel like they weren't judged or that they weren't being criticized, or that they could look at themselves for the first time with eyes that didn't have anything to do with their history.
Yeah.
That were present in the moment. And I think that's the gift that horses bring to us. They have a lot of things that they do that really, when we can slow down enough and be in their environment, that we can watch and learn, and it's an awesome experience.
Absolutely is. And I noticed myself as you were just talking about it, I started to slow down and get more in the moment of going like, wow, I'm seeing, being in the arena with the horses and having that connection with them. It really is very powerful. Tell me if I remember this correctly, you've done your training through EGALA, which is the Equine Assisted Growth and Learning Association.
Right.
And what that means is all the work you do with the women and horses is on the ground. There's no riding involved, correct?
Right. And part of the thing that's so hard to explain to people, and you and I talked a little bit about this before we started this conversation, is it's so hard to explain to people what the experience is. Because first of all, it doesn't involve any riding. And second of all, you don't have to have any horse experience whatsoever. And as a matter of fact, sometimes people with horse experience have to unlearn so much about what they know about horses to be in this different kind of relationship with them.
Right. Tell me a little bit, I guess, from the horse piece of it. You also work with an equine specialist. So you're the therapist and you've got an equine specialist, correct?
Well, I'm dually certified, so I can.
You do both.
Yes, I can do both, which really is a nice piece for me. And sometimes I work with other therapists who bring their clients out to have an equine session. And sometimes I am the therapist, but I always bring in someone to monitor horse behavior.
Yeah.
Because when you add the horse into this dynamic, it changes the way that we do therapy, that we're used to doing therapy, correct? Right. Because suddenly there are 3 or 4 entities in this space as opposed to just 2. Mm-hmm. So as a therapist, you become very decentered. It's not really about what you're bringing, except you're more holding the space for people to bring their experience in there. But the reason for the equine specialist is that this work is also, it's very hard for our horses. Mm-hmm. And there's an awful lot of information that the horse is feeding us all the time, as well as what the client is feeding us all the time. So to have 2 sets of eyes on that, one for bringing what the horse is doing and one for monitoring what the client is needing or experiencing is an important part of the process.
Yeah. And I want to go back because what you're talking about is, building that relationship between the women and the horse. And so if somebody's watching kind of the horse behavior and seeing the behaviors the horse is doing, it really does mirror back. That's why I think it's so powerful. It's very experiential work, is the horses mirror back what's going on inside of the person too, or their past experiences, and it brings it to the real life in the moment. Let's deal with it.
Right. And I think that part of what horses are prey animals. Yes. They are used to being hunted. They are we always laugh and say they're waiting for the next saber-toothed tiger to come out from behind the bush. And so they are highly aware of their environment. They live in a herd. Mm-hmm. They are always depending on that herd to determine their safety. And that means they are not listening to words, but they are watching body language. When we enter that herd, they become very conscious of what our body language is saying about us. And whether we feel safe determines whether they feel safe. They will check us out, and then they will look around and assess the situation. And if they assess that everything's okay but us, then they will react to us in a way that says, you know what's going on with you? And so that brings that self-awareness piece to the client, because the part of the job of the therapist is to say, I just noticed he just checked in with you. What was that about? And or what is your horse doing now? Well, he's walking away from me. What might that be? And giving space for them to have that experience. Well, I think he feels like I'm okay. He just is going to go check out the cat or something. Or they might say, I don't think he likes me. And say, okay. And so the horse goes over and gets a drink of water and then walks back over to the person. And then you would address, well, do you still feel like he doesn't like you? No, I think he just went over to get a drink of water and came back, and trying to apply that to other relationships. Does this feel familiar to you? Do you often think that because someone is taking care of themselves and doing something they need to do for themselves, that it's all about you in kinder terms?
Right. That's a beautiful example, because especially when you work with women, I'm guessing you have some of them are all moms too, or they're moms. And so there's that dynamic when their teenager walks away. It could be more of, it's not that they don't like you. They may be upset. They're going to go calm themselves down. So they're taking a time out, or they're going to go grab something to come back to that conversation. And I love during this whole process, you are checking in with the client and asking what that thought process is. So they become more aware as they are able to articulate that, what's going on inside of their mind. Right. And how, as you said, because horses are prey animals, horses are checking in with our body language. And so many people that I work with are not aware of their body language. And that's the majority of how we communicate is through body language.
We have a workshop called Gracefully Letting Go, and it's specifically for mothers who are having children that are leaving the nest.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
And specifically for that summer after graduation, either from college or high school, and before they leave in the fall. And how do you manage that? And what are the needs? And what are some of the things that are going to come up? And so I think for mothers, one of the things we have them do is observe a herd of horses. Mm-hmm. And a herd, we say horses eat, they play, and they sleep. And while they're doing that, they're also watching their environment. And they, when they're playing, they're establishing group dynamics and hierarchy, just like a group of teenagers.
Yes.
And I think that when parents can step back and create space. Well, one of the things I love about the horse work is that we can create space to observe things as they really are without imposing what our traditional patterns of thinking onto a situation. So once parents can kind of create that space, and we literally create the space because we stand back and observe.
Yeah.
And then we bring up things. Okay, so this guy over here is the boss of the herd. How is he communicating that to the rest of the herd, and how does that impact the rest of the herd? How does the herd reacting to the one horse who won't settle down? And does that feel like something that might be going on in your house right now? Mm-hmm. How is this horse leaving the herd? We talk about siblings. How we know how it's affecting you, Mom, and all the emotions you're having. But how is it affecting your other children that this one child is leaving? So we may pull one horse out of the herd and talk about what happens when that one horse comes out of the herd and walks toward the barn. What do the other horses do? They're all gathered at the fence watching the other horse walk into the barn. Mm-hmm. And they're conscious of it. They may start talking, whinnying or calling to this other person. And they may get agitated because the horse that is leaving may be their best buddy. Mm-hmm. What is the horse doing as it's walking into the barn to go to its next thing? Sometimes he may look back, but most of the time he's going like, okay, where are we going? What are we doing? So how is that like your teenager that's getting ready to leave the house with you all back in the herd and him going into the barn? And there's some great visual pictures there.
Yeah, that is just magical, powerful, and that's beautiful because it's raising the awareness of one, letting the mom observe, if it's her daughter getting ready to leave, how it impacts her. But if there's other kiddos in the family, raising that awareness too of it doesn't just affect the parents, it also affects the siblings. And to me, it's like a visceral experience in that.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, oh, wow. That's, it's heartbreaking or it's exciting or it's both. And it's like, and it can be similar for your kiddo, your teen daughter as she's taking off.
And sometimes if a horse is an anxious, a horse-connected horse. We have horses that are more people-connected and some that are more horse-connected. And if we can use that metaphor also for horses that when you pull them out of the herd, they don't want to leave. Mm-hmm. They want to stay there where they're comfortable. Mm-hmm. And sometimes, even though that what's waiting for them after you lead them away from the herd is going to be better for them, they don't understand that because they don't want to leave. So it's about addressing that change and then negotiating. How's the best way to do this?
Oh, beautiful. Beautiful, beautiful. Well, I want to switch gears just a little bit
Sure.
because you're doing a great job of explaining what the work is, how it impacts it, giving some examples. What are some, I guess, if you've had it, like questions, concerns, or fears that you have from maybe your moms or the women that you work with regarding doing specifically EAP?
Well, I think the number one thing that we've already talked about is that they don't always understand what it's going to be.
Yeah.
That the process is very hard to explain. The power of the process is hard to articulate, just like it is right now.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think when you're standing next to a 1,200-pound animal who's got a mind of their own and is making choices based on his environment
Mm-hmm.
and what his needs are, it's hard to describe what that interaction is going to look like because it's different every single time.
Right.
And I think people feel like they're not equipped to do the work because they don't have horse knowledge,
Mm-hmm.
because they've never been in that situation. So it's sort of that reluctance to jump out into something that you have no clue what it's going to be like. Often, I think people also just hesitate because there's some, horses are big
Mm-hmm.
and horses can, do some things that we don't expect.
Right.
And so there's that piece of being out of control.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's a piece of being vulnerable in a new way.
Mm-hmm.
And once people get into it, I think sometimes it's disconcerting how quickly if they're used to wearing I've got everything under control, I've got all of this that I do so well, and if they're wearing sort of that mask or if they have that wall up so that they really don't want to visit the emotions about the daughter launching, and all of a sudden they're in this arena with this horse and all bets are off and their masks are off and their hearts are open, the walls are down, and they're feeling things that they want to feel but they've been afraid to feel.
Yeah.
So it's a process of education.
It is, and I love it, just the way you explained it too. It's like, well, it's such a metaphor for working with people in and of itself, right? If we think we have control of others, that's false. We don't. The only person we have control of is ourselves. And so when we don't stop and allow ourselves to truly be vulnerable and put that out there, it stops the relationship from going deeper. And so as you're saying, it's like working with the horses. Yeah, they can feel big and scary and intimidating. And at the same time, when you allow yourself just to kind of drop more into your body and observe, that's the same thing in all human relationships too.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think one of the most powerful pieces that happen is the process of practicing being in the moment and mindfulness when you're with the horses. And it's because you have to.
Yeah.
And it brings so many parts of your brain online as opposed to just the emotional aspect of something. It's also the body sensations. It's the orientation in space of your body. It's paying attention to keeping yourself safe. It's paying attention to what's going on a bigger sense in your environment. So there's all these parts of your brain that are lighting up that you get to practice all those pieces being lighted up and how they can reintegrate. And you can be aware of so much and how that feels. And I think a lot of the horse work, the awesomeness of the horse work, it comes from that part of being in the moment for, if the session is an hour long, you're in the moment for most of that hour.
Right.
When you think about most of your days, you are either, I think the research says, 85% of the time, we are not in the moment.
Yeah. It's a big chunk.
Yeah. So being in the moment can be a really stimulating experience for people. And it's a powerful experience. And one of the things we get to do with the horses is practice new ways of being. And being mindful is one of those. But also how we're communicating. And I think for moms, this is the biggest thing. How do we approach a horse so that he trusts us to come into his space to do something with him or for him, is also says a lot about how we come into a teenager's space, our daughter's space, in order for her to trust that we have something that's valuable for her to hear or to do. So it's not picking your arguments, but understanding how you present what it is that you need to present to her.
Yeah.
And how are you going to get her to listen? So how do you get the horse to listen? It's not about your words.
Right.
It's about your body posture.
Yeah. And you've covered it, because part of the next, thing we were going to talk about is the benefits. And there's so many benefits of doing this type of work. And getting out of your head, more into your body, becoming more aware, being more mindful, how you enter into a relationship, what your body language conveys to somebody else, so that you, needing, like mom, needing to get something across or talk about with your daughter, and at the same time coming in with, your face is all clenched and you're just tense, you're not going to have more necessarily an open conversation, because their guard goes up, because their own brain gets activated to that. And so, yes, practicing this mindfulness throughout the work in the arena really then can be taken back into their life and shown through their actual relationships with the other humans too.
Oh, yeah. And people, we do a lot of groups with women who are just in those beginning stages of forming new relationships after some severe trauma. And they are surprised at how much their posture actually changes from the beginning to the end, as they gain confidence, as they gain insight into what their needs are and what they're wanting people to see about them, as opposed to, and we talk about this sometimes as a bully, young women who have been bullied. Come into the arena, their posture is very guarded, and their shoulders will be slumped up. They're sort of in that posture that's guarding their heart, kind of a thing. And I can't tell you how many times we've had horses come up and just lay their muzzle right on on someone's chest whose posture is very guarded, and just gently do it, and then sometimes they just walk away. Sometimes they'll move into another place that's in proximity to the person, but there's something about that drops walls, and that opens people to, well, how did he even get into my heart? Because my shoulders are so. But and then we ask people often, well, what is it that you want to do right now? Well, I would love to touch him. Well, walk over and touch him. And so we're starting to respond to those things that we need.
Yeah. And to be able to articulate that and then, act on that. It's like whether it's, I need to ask permission, or, okay, I'm going to do this. And that assertiveness and confidence level begins to gain momentum. Yeah.
And to not be afraid if he does turn and walk away.
Right.
Because then we can explain that as horse behavior, which then we can explain as that's his doing his thing. That's not about you.
Yes.
And sort of changing the perspective there. And growing that sense of what is yours to own and what is someone else's to own.
All that boundary and those good education things that, it's like setting the boundaries, understanding boundaries or the limits, and where I start and where you start. And that's beautiful.
So horses are great for boundary work.
Yes. Yes, they are. Well, I am curious, as you're working with, the women or the moms, is there a book or a piece of advice maybe as you're closing with them, or even doing some work outside the workshop or the therapy sessions that you recommend or ask about?
Yeah. I think number one is, if you are considering doing some equine assisted psychotherapy, or EAP is what we call it. It's got this really long name, but that you want to work with a well-qualified team of mental health professionals and equine professionals, and someone who's really has the certification or the credentials to do the work. Just because I think lots of times people get that this is so powerful and they really have a heart to help people, but there is so much more to it than just having a horse and a heart to do the work. As you said, EGALA is, and that's egala.org. It has great information on that site. I'm also a PATH, Professional Association of Therapeutic Horsemanship, equine specialist, and they have information on their site also. I love Chris Irwin's book, Horses Don't Lie.
Oh, yes.
So I always give that to people who are looking to go into equine assisted psychotherapy, and people who are wanting to know more about horse behavior. Okay. And why horses act the way they do, and why it's so powerful for us as humans. And I think for general purposes, I love the Boundaries book series.
Yeah. Yes.
And I think for moms especially, as we're doing this work as mothers and our roles change and it becomes there's new insecurities that come with new and boundaries that we never thought we would have again in our lives. And it's all about, how much do I text? How much do I call? How much money do I send? How much do I visit? I want, and sort of figuring that out for yourself. I think the Boundaries books are great. I love Brene Brown's work about how to move into that next season. And we do a lot of our letting go gracefully. Part of that is really rediscovering who you are without the name of mother.
Yes.
I mean, you're always the mom, but how do you add on to that and become, Nicole or Charlotte again?
Yeah.
And move into this next stage, because your life's not over, because your children, you've raised your children to do what they were supposed to do, right?
Right.
And how do you recreate that sense of self? I love Kristen Neff's work on self-compassion. I think that's important. And if you're a horse person looking for or a therapist I love Linda Graham's exercises for mindfulness and resourcing. Really easily translates into the horse environment.
Excellent. Well, I will definitely put all of these on the show notes as well for people to be able to see and look through. Those are great websites and book recommendations. And yes, I'm like, I got that one and that one.
And the other thing that we always do with our groups and with my individuals is start that gratitude journal. And if it's one thing a day, we're just priming our brains to really look for the good stuff. And, what is the thing that's right in all this stuff that feels like it's all gone amok or haywire.
Yes.
So that's the other thing, I think.
Excellent. I will definitely put that in there too. So before we end our conversation, can you tell our listeners how they can actually find you? What's your website, or where are you located again?
Well, I'm in Lexington, Kentucky. I do my equine work at Central Kentucky Riding for Hope, and that is ckrh.org. But my website is lexingtonwomenstherapy.com.
Excellent. And I will, for all you listeners out there, I will put that in the show notes too. So if you're driving and you can't get to it, not a problem. You'll be able to find that on the show notes. So you can click there and find out more about Charlotte and what she has to offer. Well, thank you so much, Charlotte. I loved this conversation, and it definitely brings back memories of the work and just how powerful working with horses is to create connection and to help women, moms, and even the teens to be able to gain more confidence and to be more aware of themselves and gain more insight about themselves.
Right. And Nicole, I really thank you for having me do this with you. And I love the work that you're doing.
Well, thank you. So appreciate that. Thank you for listening to Launching Your Daughter with Nicole Burgess, licensed marriage and family therapist. For more information or to stay up to date, go to launchingyourdaughter.com. You can sign up for my email list or join my Facebook group. Thank you.